Welcome, Prashant, for being with us today to discuss about governance and compliance specific in India for companies.
Thank you very much, Pierre. It's good to be here.
Prashant, you are today the managing partner of BTG Advaya and a litigator specializing in white-collar, regular defense, internal investigation, and complex disputes. You have held leadership roles at Osborne Clarke, both in London and Köln, Germany, and have been managing European legal operations in-house counsel at Infosys. Also, you know quite well France, since you have been working for 5 years at Franklin. Concerning your law firm, BTG Advaya, it's a dispute and transactional law firm with more than 50 lawyers across 4 offices in India. Your team values best-of-breed technical expertise, a culture of innovation, and a commitment to excellence. The firm, and this is something that is very rare, your firm has an industry sector focus from aerospace, defense, energy to pharma, retail, extractive industrial, and manufacturing. I'd like to ask you a first question. What are the specific challenges related to governance and compliance in India for companies?
Thank you, Pierre. I think for governance and compliance, especially for French companies or European companies with operations in India, I think there are 3 big challenges. The first challenge really is the differing legal standards. You have different EU standards here, and of course you have Indian legal standards. Now, these standards may not always match, so the first challenge is to find out what is matching between these standards. And then the second part of that challenge is also to understand what is not matching and how that can be harmonized together. Because a French company will need to comply obviously with the home law, the home country law in France or EU, and it will also need to comply with Indian regulatory standards and legal standards. So that's the first challenge, different legal standards. And that has an implication on governance and reporting, of course. The second most important challenge, which is as important as the first one, is different cultural standards. I believe that governance is 50% legal and 50% culture. Obviously, France and the EU has different culture of governance, different culture of reporting, disclosures. In India, the legal standards are very strong, but the cultural standards of governance may vary. It depends on your partner or your JV, joint venture, shareholder. It may depend on the supplier that you're dealing with in India. And understanding the culture of these companies and the management and the shareholders in India is extremely important for a French company that is operating in India or has exposure in India. It's a common misconception that Indian companies don't have good governance standards. That's not true. We have the best Indian companies like Tata, for example, who have the best governance standards. But of course, there are many, many millions of companies, and some of those companies don't have great governance standards. But what is important really is if the management and the shareholders of the company have good cultural attunement towards governance, then all the rest can be built in. The last challenge, specific challenge, is getting the right answers, linked to both point number 1 and point number 2. When, for example, the French headquarters management asks a question, it can be interpreted very differently if the Indian management or the Indian shareholders don't know the answers, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. When the Indian company provides the answer, the French HQ may interpret it very differently. So making sure that you're asking the right question and you're getting the right answer is the most important third challenge. In other words, I think communication between the two and trust between the two is extremely important. And what kind of questions you ask is also extremely important.
Very clear about the 3 points you mentioned, Prashant. What should be done when, if issues arise related to governance and compliance, which could notably lead to ongoing investigations? What actions should a company take?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Pierre. Thank you. I think whenever a governance issue becomes big enough to merit an investigation, and that's actually the first point, really. Before a governance issue becomes an investigation, the Indian management, as well as the French headquarters, should sit down and verify and understand whether it's actually a real issue or not, whether it's simply miscommunication, whether there is a motive behind a whistleblower report, for example, and actually that whistleblower report does not have any substance. So you have to verify whether it is critical or not. If it is critical, and this is where either your Indian management or your Indian lawyers will play a role in trying to make you understand or getting you to understand whether it is critical or not. And if it is critical, then the investigation should start. Not all whistleblower reports, not all governance issues need an investigation. Only very few critical ones do. But when you get into investigation, there's 2 or 3 points that every company management should know or the leadership should know. One is, what is the damage control immediately they need to do? And this is where, again, local knowledge is extremely important. For example, we had a case where there was a polluting industry which was releasing effluents into the land without treating it. And the main critical issue there was that the villagers who were living around this industry, if they had gotten involved, because the water was being, or the effluents were being left into their fields, this would quickly escalate to become a political issue. It could quickly escalate to become a police issue. So damage control, to make sure whatever is happening is controlled immediately and the effluents should be shut off immediately. And on the local level, there should be complete transparency within the organization to do it and not continue doing it. So damage control is the first one. The second one linked to it is make sure that your investigation does not trigger a criminal investigation in India. Unlike, let's say, in the US or sometimes even in France, in India, there is no system of a negotiated settlement or a monetary settlement with the regulatory authorities when it comes to white-collar crime action or prosecution. If there's a prosecution that is, we call it an FIR, First Information Report, is lodged in the police station or with the Special Economic Offences Wing, the investigation has to happen. There is no negotiation. There is no disclosure. There is no leeway given to you because you are actually cooperating with the investigation. There's no such thing as a negotiated settlement. So make sure that your investigation happens in a way that it does not trigger criminal action in India. That's the second point. The third point is actually very small, but it can become extremely important, which is always check for conflict of interest. We had many instances where, for example, our client's whistleblower hotline used to report to the local HR and the management of the local Indian subsidiary. Now, obviously, there's a conflict of interest there because some of the allegations may be against the local management, some of the allegations could be against the local HR. So you have to make sure that your investigation is done without conflict of interest. And the last thing I want to say here, and then pause, is it is super, super important to have on-the-ground verification, interviews with people affected, physical visits to your manufacturing facilities, physical verification of the documents and accounting, originals, not necessarily scanned copies only, because we've seen in our experience in many instances, what is being conveyed to headquarters is very different from what is there on the ground. So physical verification and getting the right answers to some tough questions is extremely important.
Thanks. It's very clear about your recommendation. Let's say, for example, in the case where ultimately the investigations lead to legal litigations.
Yeah.
What actions should companies take in India to secure their interests?
It's a very interesting but also a difficult question. I'd like to answer by saying that the French companies should do what the Indian companies do. Know your competitor and know what your competitor may do if they were in a similar situation. As European companies, I've seen very often that companies look at litigation and the end result of the litigation as a win or a lose. In India, that's not the case because litigation takes time in India. So Indian companies, and what we advise our clients is look at the litigation itself as a strategic tool to enable you to come to a solution either with your partner or with your opposing party, and use litigation smartly as a tool. Now, obviously, there are instances where you cannot use it as a tool and then you have to go through the entire litigation. There, what is required is a lot of patience. Indian legal system works. Corruption levels are low. It's not as bad as everyone says it is. The appeal process works. The rule of law applies, but it takes time because of the volume of cases. But there are ways to short circuit that. There are legal methods to use to short circuit that. For example, for any commercial dispute in India, there is a law which is not often used. There is a law which requires mediation before a commercial dispute. So we have seen that in 30% of the cases that we work on, mediation actually works because very often it's the egos that are clashing in a litigation. If you remove the egos, you put in a process, a mediation process, it may work. So use that as a first option. The second option is in India, you win or lose a case very often, not always, on the basis of an interim relief. That is an injunction or a stay order. So let's say you are able to get an injunction from stopping your opposing party from doing something. Or you get an order asking the opposing party to deposit a certain sum of money in the court's bank account, right? All of these are leverage that you can use in a negotiation to settle with the Indian party. A lot of Indian parties settle. Litigation is, like I said, a tool. So use the litigation, win at the interim stage, put a lot of effort at the interim stage, and push for negotiated settlement as much as possible. And the last thing I would say is choose your courts and your arbitration very, very carefully when you're drafting the contract. There are some courts in India that are much more progressive. They're much quicker. But if you get stuck in the wrong court, then you can be there for years. Similarly, arbitration. Choose an arbitration body, which is an international arbitration body, and make sure that you have a selection of arbitrators that work quickly and efficiently and in a fair manner. And you should be able to at least mitigate the pain of litigation or arbitration in India.
Prashant, thank you for your very pragmatic answers.
Pleasure.
I'd like to know more about BTG Advaya. You know, we, as we mentioned at the beginning of our interview, it's a business law firm present in India in several cities: Mumbai, New Delhi, Bengaluru. But what struck me was that it's your law firm has a differentiated approach per industry sector, and also, and this is something rare also, that you have a majority of former general counsels and in-house lawyers. So, question I'd like to ask you is, can you please tell us why such an approach?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Pierre. It's actually been one of the founding principles of the firm. When we talk to clients or potential clients, we know that we are amongst another 100, 200 law firms. So what we want to do with the general counsels or the compliance officers or the board or the CEOs or the CXOs or the CFOs is we want to tell them two things. First, we understand your industry. We understand your competitors. We understand the market practice. We may not be able to understand their industry as good as they do because they do it and they live it every day. But a lot of us have worked in certain industry sectors. For example, my aerospace and defense industry expertise is over the last 15 years. Similarly, nuclear energy, I've worked for about 18 years now. So we know the industry issues, we know the market practice in these industries, and we also know what is important and critical for the general counsels in these industries. The second thing we always tell the general counsels is we know what you want. You don't want a 40-page document while a 4-page executive summary document can achieve what you want. You don't want a list of pros and cons and then no recommendation. So we stick our neck out and we say, these are the pros and cons, it's your decision, but we recommend that you consider this point of view or this way of action very seriously. The reason we are able to do that is most of us, including me, have been in-house. We know that they're on the front line. We know that their business will not want to see a 40-page memo on some law and explaining the regulation. They want actionable advice, which they can actually implement on a day-to-day basis. So I think both these have really worked well for us. Our clients have trusted us for many, many years now, and most of our revenues even today comes from repeat business and repeat clients, and our relationships are extremely strong.
Prashant, thank you for sharing your experience and expertise about governance and compliance in India.
Thank you very much, Pierre. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you.